Have you ever wondered why some men collapse under pressure while others become sharper? Do you know someone who keeps promising discipline, only to return to comfort the moment life becomes uncomfortable? What if the issue is not motivation, not intelligence, not even willpower, but a fundamentally broken relationship with discipline itself? In Japanese traditions like Bushido and Kaizen, discipline was never designed to make life easier. It existed to make the man reliable under strain. Today, most men try to suppress weakness or outsmart it with hacks and shortcuts. That fails, because discipline is not suppression. It is transformation through repeated intentional exposure to difficulty. This video is for those tired of restarting. If that's you, stay with me. Now, back to the video. Have you ever noticed how some people genuinely want to change, yet keep ending up in the same place? Do you know someone who looks disciplined on paper but unreliable in real life? Ethan is one of those men, and for a long time he believes his problem is laziness. Ethan is 32, educated, capable, and fully aware of what he should be doing. He wakes up on Mondays with resolve. He installs new apps, orders a fresh planner, maps out morning routines, and tells himself this time will be different. For a few days it is. He wakes up earlier, he works out, he eats better. The structure gives him a brief sense of control. Then pressure arrives. A demanding week at work, a critical email, a night of poor sleep. Nothing dramatic, just enough friction to disrupt the plan. And when that happens, Ethan doesn't consciously choose to quit. He simply drifts. The workout becomes optional. The routine gets postponed. Comfort behaviors quietly return, justified as temporary. By Friday, the system has collapsed. By Sunday night, the guilt sets in. Monday promises begin again. Ethan tells himself he lacks discipline. He compares himself to men who seem consistent and assumes they possess something he doesn't. More drive, more toughness, more motivation. What he doesn't see is that his problem is not weakness of character, but absence of structure that can survive stress. Psychologically, Ethan's discipline is conditional. It exists only when life cooperates. The moment discomfort rises, his nervous system seeks relief, not responsibility. This is not a moral failure. It is a predictable response when discipline is built on mood instead of process. He has desire but no system, and under pressure desire collapses first. This is where the story begins, not with failure but with clarity. Because until a man understands why he keeps slipping, he will keep mistaking effort for progress and motivation for discipline. The first real breakdown doesn't arrive as a dramatic collapse. It arrives quietly, disguised as a normal setback. A project Ethan has been leading for months is suddenly pulled from him. Leadership changes direction. His role becomes unclear. The structure that once told him where to be, what to do, and when to perform is gone. At first he tells himself he will adapt. He still wakes up at the same time. He still opens his laptop with intention. But something feels different. Without clear expectations pressing against him, his days begin to blur. Small decisions start to feel heavy. He checks his phone more often. Tasks that once felt manageable now feel strangely overwhelming. What's happening is subtle but critical. Ethan's discipline was never internal. It was borrowed. It depended on deadlines, accountability, and external pressure to function. When those disappear, so does his behavior. Instead of responding directly to the uncertainty, Ethan avoids it. He delays difficult conversations. He postpones decisions that could clarify his position. In the evenings, he numbs himself with familiar comforts, telling himself he deserves rest after a stressful day. The relief is immediate. The cost is invisible at first. Psychologically, this is the moment his system collapses. His brain is not choosing comfort because it is weak, but because it has never been trained to remain steady without structure. When stress rises and guidance disappears, the nervous system defaults to regulation through escape. Ethan interprets this as proof that he lacks discipline. In reality, it reveals something more precise. His discipline only existed when conditions were favorable. It was not discipline, it was dependency on circumstances. This is the danger of mood-based discipline. It feels real when life is stable, but vanishes the moment uncertainty appears. And because Ethan does not yet understand this distinction, he internalizes the failure. He doesn't question the system. He questions himself. The breakdown is not the setback itself. The breakdown is the realization, however faint, that without external pressure, he does not know how to hold himself together. After the breakdown, Ethan does what many men do when they feel exposed. He doesn't slow down to understand what failed. He accelerates. Guilt becomes fuel. The discomfort of slipping is unbearable, so he decides to erase it with effort. He creates stricter rules, earlier mornings, harder workouts, longer work hours. He cuts out rest completely, believing that suffering itself will purify him. For a short time, the intensity works. The shame quiets down. He feels in control again, and he mistakes that feeling for commitment. But intensity is not stability. It is a spike, not a foundation. As days pass, the system begins to crack. His body tightens, his mind becomes impatient. Small obstacles feel heavier than they should. He starts missing details, snapping at minor frustrations, and resenting the very discipline he imposed on himself. Eventually, something gives, a missed workout, a late night, one decision that breaks the streak. The relapse feels catastrophic. All the suppressed guilt rushes back, heavier than before. Ethan tells himself he is inconsistent, undisciplined, flawed, and so the cycle restarts. Shame, overcompensation, burnout, collapse. Psychologically, this loop is self-reinforcing. Shame triggers excessive effort. Excessive effort overwhelms the nervous system. Overload leads to avoidance. Avoidance confirms shame. The mind learns that discipline equals pain, and pain must eventually be escaped. What makes this loop dangerous is that it feels productive. Ethan is always trying, always planning, always restarting, but nothing integrates, nothing becomes automatic. Each attempt resets him to 0. This is the trap of shame-based self-improvement. It doesn't remove weakness, it rehearses it. Each collapse trains the brain to associate challenge with threat instead of adaptation. Instead of becoming more resilient, Ethan becomes more fragile, even as he appears more driven. He doesn't yet realize that discipline built on self-punishment cannot last. It demands emotional energy faster than the system can supply it, and until that misunderstanding is corrected, every new attempt will look different on the surface, but end the same way underneath. Ethan quotes, "Idea of strength is simple and exhausting. To him, discipline means forcing himself forward, while every part of him resists. He believes the discomfort is proof that the work is effective. If it hurts, it must be making him stronger. If he hates it, it must be necessary." Each time Ethan pushes himself through sheer resistance, he tightens internally. His jaw clenches, his thoughts narrow. He treats discomfort as an enemy to be defeated rather than a signal to be understood. The more tension he applies, the more relief he expects at the finish line. And when relief doesn't come, frustration builds. Psychologically, this creates a conflict inside the mind. One part of Ethan is trying to move forward, while another part is fighting to escape. The action may continue for a while, but the internal resistance doesn't disappear. It accumulates. Here is the critical insight he does not yet see. What you resist emotionally does not weaken. It strengthens. When discomfort is treated as a threat, the nervous system amplifies it. The brain learns to associate effort with danger. Over time, even small challenges trigger disproportionate resistance. What once required mild effort now demands immense willpower. Ethan mistakes this internal battle for proof of toughness. In reality, it is proof of inefficiency. True strength does not feel like constant self-conflict. It feels stable, quiet, repeatable. By hating every step, Ethan is training himself to avoid the very behaviors he wants to sustain. The mind remembers emotional tone more than logical intention, and the emotional tone of his discipline is hostility. This is why his progress never consolidates. He is not teaching himself how to endure discomfort calmly. He is teaching himself that discomfort must be escaped eventually. Until this definition of strength changes, nothing else can. Discipline built on resistance will always require escalating force, and eventually something inside will refuse to cooperate. Ethan senses this, even if he cannot articulate it yet. Beneath the effort there is a growing question forming, one that will soon force him to reconsider everything he believes about discipline. Ethan doesn't seek out Kenji Sato because he wants guidance. He seeks him out because he is tired of failing in the same way. Kenji is older, calm, and deliberately unimpressive in the way he speaks. No slogans, no urgency. When Ethan explains his history of discipline, Kenji listens without interrupting. Then he asks a question that immediately unsettles him. Why do you believe discipline should feel like a fight? Ethan pauses. No one has asked him that before. He starts to explain effort, sacrifice, strength, but the words sound rehearsed, even to him. Kenji doesn't correct him. He simply lets the silence do the work. Over the next sessions, Kenji makes something clear. He is not there to motivate Ethan. Motivation, he explains, is unreliable. It rises and falls with emotion. What Ethan lacks is not desire, it is conditioning. Kenji introduces a reframing that shifts everything. Discipline, he says, is not an ego exercise. It is nervous system training. The body learns before the mind believes. If the nervous system associates action with threat, it will eventually rebel, no matter how strong the intention. Ethan begins to understand why forcing himself never worked. Each attempt trained tension, not stability. Each relapse reinforced avoidance, not resilience. Kenji draws from Japanese discipline systems, explaining that they were never designed to inspire feelings of power. They were designed to produce calm execution under pressure. The goal was not to conquer discomfort, but to coexist with it, without emotional reaction. 4. This distinction hits Ethan harder than any motivational speech ever has. For the first time, his failures make sense without condemning him. Kenji offers no dramatic solution. Instead, he removes something. Ethan's belief that discipline must hurt to be real. What replaces it is unsettling in a different way. The responsibility to train slowly, deliberately, without emotional reward. This is not the moment Ethan feels strong. It is the moment he feels exposed. Because if discipline is training, not force, then everything he has been doing must change. Kenji introduces Bushido without reverence or drama. He speaks of it as a practical code, not a myth. To Ethan's surprise, Bushido is not described as a philosophy of aggression or dominance, but of reliability. A samurai, Kenji explains, was not judged by intensity, passion, or emotional conviction. He was judged by whether he could be counted on when conditions were unfavorable. Ethan listens closely as Kenji dismantles another assumption. Modern culture encourages self-expression. Act when you feel aligned, rest when you feel drained, wait until motivation appears. Bushido operated on a different axis entirely. Action was taken regardless of emotional weather, not out of suppression, but out of clarity. Kenji explains the core shift. Feelings were never given veto power over behavior. They were acknowledged, then ignored. This does not mean the samurai were emotionless. It means emotion was not allowed to negotiate responsibility. Fear, fatigue, doubt, these were treated as background noise, not decision makers. The discipline was external at first, then internalized through repetition. Psychologically, this removes a dangerous pattern. When emotions dictate action, inconsistency becomes inevitable. Feelings fluctuate, systems endure. Bushido understood that reliability emerges only when behavior is decoupled from internal states. Ethan realizes how often he has waited to feel ready. How many times discomfort has delayed action under the disguise of self-awareness. What he called honesty was often avoidance. Kenji is precise. Discipline does not eliminate excuses by force. It renders them irrelevant. When the rule is clear and behavior is non-negotiable, excuses lose their function. This idea is uncomfortable. It removes Ethan's favorite escape, the belief that he can act later when conditions improve. Bushido offers no such luxury. It asks only one question: can you be trusted to act when you do not feel like it? For the first time, discipline begins to feel impersonal, not cruel, not heroic, simply inevitable. And in that inevitability, something unexpected appears, not pressure, but relief. Kenji does not tell Ethan to do more. He tells him to do less, deliberately, and under control. This is how he introduces Shugyo, not as punishment, not as endurance theater, but as voluntary hardship chosen with precision. Shugyo, Kenji explains, is the practice of stepping into discomfort before life forces it upon you. The purpose is not to suffer, it is to remain composed while discomfort is present. The difference matters. Ethan quotes previous approach had been chaotic. He waited until guilt peaked, then overwhelmed himself with extreme routines. Shugyo replaces that pattern with something quieter and more demanding, consistency without drama. Cold showers that are brief, not heroic. Training sessions that end before resentment begins. Work done at a steady pace, regardless of enthusiasm. Each act is intentionally small, but non-negotiable. Psychologically, This shifts the training target. Ethan is no longer testing how much pain he can tolerate. He is training his nervous system to stay regulated while discomfort exists. Over time, the body learns that difficulty does not require panic or escape. Kenji emphasizes cause and effect. When discomfort is introduced gradually and repeatedly, the system adapts. Calm replaces resistance. Stability replaces tension. This is conditioning, not motivation. Ethan notices the change first in his reactions. Tasks that once triggered avoidance now feel neutral, not pleasant, but manageable. He stops negotiating with himself. The internal arguments grow shorter, then disappear. This is where Shugyo differs from self-punishment. Punishment carries anger. Shugyo carries intention. One erodes trust in the self. The other builds it. For the first time, discipline does not feel like a test of character. It feels like training. Predictable, repeatable, almost boring. And that is the point. Because boredom means the nervous system is no longer in fight or flight. It means discomfort has lost its emotional charge. Ethan is not becoming harder. He is becoming steadier. The hardship has not disappeared, but it no longer controls him. For several weeks the system holds. Ethan follows the structure Kenji gave him without enthusiasm and without resistance. He does the work, ends when planned, and moves on. There is no surge of pride, no sense of transformation, just consistency. And for the first time, that consistency feels stable. Then a high-stress week arrives. Unexpected deadlines stack. Sleep shortens. A personal conflict demands attention. The familiar pressure returns, and with it, old patterns. One morning, Ethan skips a practice. He tells himself it's temporary. By the end of the week, several routines have slipped. The failure lands differently this time. Ethan notices the reflex to judge himself forming, but it doesn't fully take hold. When he meets Kenji, he expects correction. Instead, Kenji asks him to describe exactly what happened without explanation. Without defense. Kenji reframes the relapse as data. He explains that conditioning does not progress in a straight line. Under increased stress, the nervous system will revert to familiar responses. This is not proof of weakness. It is proof that training has reached a new threshold. What matters is not the slip, but the response to it. In the past, Ethan would have turned failure into identity. He would have escalated effort or abandoned the system entirely. This time, Kenji instructs him to resume exactly where he left off. No punishment, no compensation, no emotional reaction. Psychologically common. This neutrality is critical. Emotional overreaction reinforces the importance of the failure. Calm resumption teaches the brain that disruption is survivable. Ethan begins to understand that relapse is not the opposite of progress. It is part of it. Each return strengthens the pathway of recovery. Each neutral response reduces the emotional charge associated with disruption. It bends without breaking. This is where real discipline separates from performance. Discipline is not the absence of failure. It is the speed and calmness of return. Ethan leaves the session unsettled, but grounded. The old urge to dramatize has lost its grip. The work continues, not heroically, not perfectly, but intact. Kenji waits until Ethan is no longer obsessed with results before introducing Kaizen. He explains it without ceremony. Kaizen, he says, is not about improvement as a feeling. It is about improvement as a function of repetition. Ethan expects something more inspiring. Instead, Kenji talks about scale, changes so small they almost feel pointless. Actions that do not create pride or momentum, steps that cannot be failed dramatically, because they barely register emotionally. Kenji explains the mechanism clearly. Identity is not formed by intensity. It is formed by frequency. The brain tracks what you do repeatedly and draws conclusions from it. Not once, not when motivated, but over time. Under Kaizen, progress becomes mechanical. Ethan wakes up and completes the minimum required action, regardless of mood. There is no celebration, no internal dialogue. The action ends, and the day continues. This removes a dangerous dependency, motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Systems endure. By lowering the emotional threshold for action, Ethan no longer waits to feel ready. The behavior executes almost automatically. And because it is small, resistance does not build. Psychologically, this reinforces identity without effort. Each completed action sends a signal. This is what I do, not because it feels good, not because it proves anything, but because it is normal. Over weeks, Ethan notices a subtle shift. He no longer thinks of himself as someone trying to be disciplined. The behavior no longer feels aspirational. It feels assumed. Kenji emphasizes that Kaizen is not about speed. It is about irreversibility. Small actions compound quietly until reversal feels unnatural. Kaizen. This is where most people misunderstand habit formation. They chase inspiration, believing it creates change. In reality, inspiration is optional. Repetition is not. Discipline stops requiring belief. It requires only execution. There is no dramatic moment when this clicks. No sense of arrival, just a growing calm certainty that the work will happen tomorrow and the day after, whether he feels like it or not. And that certainty changes everything. The proof does not arrive as a breakthrough moment. It arrives as a crisis Ethan did not prepare for and no longer fears. Months into the process, an unexpected situation unfolds at work. A key decision must be made quickly. Information is incomplete. Tension rises around him. In the past, this would have triggered anxiety, overthinking, or avoidance. This time, something else happens. Ethan assesses the situation, identifies the next necessary action, and moves. There is no internal debate, no surge of confidence, no need to feel ready. He simply responds. What surprises him most is not the action itself, but the absence of noise inside his mind. The familiar urgency to escape discomfort is gone. Pressure is present, but it does not destabilize him. Others notice before he does. Colleagues begin deferring to his judgment, not because he asserts authority, but because he is consistent. He does what he says he will do. He remains steady when conditions are unclear. His responses are measured, not reactive. This is how internal discipline becomes externally visible. Trust is built quietly, not through performance, but through predictability. People rely on Ethan because he does not disappear under stress. He does not overreact. He does not need reassurance. Psychologically, this is the final confirmation of the system. The nervous system no longer treats uncertainty as threat. Action flows without emotional friction. Ethan recognizes the difference immediately. Discipline no longer feels like something he is maintaining. It feels like something that has settled into place. There is no pride in this moment. No sense of having arrived. Only a calm awareness that he is no longer negotiating with himself. This is what quiet authority looks like. Not dominance, not intensity, reliability under pressure. The change is undeniable, not because Ethan feels different, but because life responds differently to him. The system, once fully visible, is almost disappointingly simple. There are no secrets hidden inside it, no special traits required. Discipline did not emerge for Ethan because he became more motivated, more inspired, or more confident. It emerged because the process stopped depending on emotion. First, emotion was removed from decision-making. Actions were no longer negotiated based on mood, energy, or belief. They were executed because they were scheduled. Feelings were allowed to exist, but they were no longer allowed to decide. Second, discomfort was trained gradually, not through punishment or extremes, but through repeated, controlled exposure. Difficulty became familiar. Familiarity removed fear. Calm replaced resistance. Not because Ethan became tougher, but because his nervous system adapted. The process was repeated without negotiation. No compensation for failure. No celebration for success. Just quiet return. Over time, this repetition stripped discipline of drama. What once felt painful became neutral. What once required effort became automatic. This is where most men misunderstand weakness. Weakness is not a character flaw. It is not a moral failure. It is an untrained response to discomfort. When pressure appears and behavior collapses, it does not mean something is wrong with you. It means the system has not been conditioned yet. Ethan no longer tells himself stories about who he is or isn't. He simply does the work. And because the work is small, consistent, and unemotional, it continues. There is relief in this realization. You do not need to become someone else. You do not need to defeat part of yourself. You need to stop negotiating with discomfort and start training your response to it. So ask yourself this, honestly and without judgment. What would change if you stopped waiting to feel ready? What would change if action became automatic instead of emotional? If this resonated, leave a comment and subscribe, not as a gesture of motivation, but as a reminder to continue the work the same way it began, calmly, consistently, without drama,